Journalism has become a business. Our laws don't restrict media freedom. Anyone can be a journalist. If you want qualified journalists, you don't need training courses. If you apply that condition, there'll be very few of them left.
But the lack of professionalism creates a murky news industry where many cross the line between journalism and blackmail. Chantal Show, Al Jazeera, Russia Province, Cambodia.
Well, for more on the story, you can watch Chan Tao Chu's full program on 101 East, Cambodia's news blackmailers, on Thursday at 22:30 GMT. The Royal Television Society in London has honored 3 Al Jazeera journalists who've been in jail in Egypt. Peter Gresta said he was truly humbled to accept the award as Muhammad Fahmi and Bahar Muhammad prepared to fight for their freedom too. Barnaby Phillips reports.
From an Egyptian prison to a gala dinner in London, for Peter Gresta, it's been a whirlwind 2.5 weeks. How different to the courtroom and prison where he spent all of last year. Peter's joy in his release, tempered by the knowledge that his colleagues Muhammad Fahmi and Bahir Muhammad must still fight their case in an Egyptian court.
It weighs on me enormously.
Cancelled all domestic flights, as you may know, until midday today, Everton, and that is the situation there because of the snow. Are things looking like they're going to improve?
Well, it should slowly start to improve now, and it will obviously take a while for the snow to clear, but the worst of the snow showers are out of the way. Take a look at the satellite picture. You can see this little area of cloud here, easing its way from west to east out of Turkey. It's going to run its way across northern parts of the Middle East, so that in itself will cause some problems, but those problems will be elsewhere. This was Istanbul earlier. You can see it's caused problems not only in the air, it has also caused some problems on the water, and it has also caused some problems, as you can see, on the road, on the rails, and on the trams. So good old dusting of snow coming across Turkey. Some very, very heavy snowfall has been in place. We're actually seeing things starting to improve over the next couple of days. You can see 4 degrees there for Ankara, wind still coming from the whole northerly direction. East Turkey, we'll see a fair amount of snow as we come on through Friday. And then some weather over the eastern side of the Mediterranean. We're looking at 12 degrees there in Beirut with some heavy rain, only 4 Celsius for Jerusalem. Don't be surprised then if you do also see some sleeper snow coming in from that particular system. It'll make its way further eastwards as we go on through Saturday. We have got clearer skies then highs. There you go, diary, brighter skies in Turkey, Ankara. Temperatures around 5 degrees Celsius. But we are looking at a possibility of a fair amount of sleeper snow just pushing across Iraq, northern parts of Iraq, to northern parts of Iran. So we are going to see something of improvement in the weather across the eastern side of the Mediterranean, northern areas of Africa, Egypt at least. Have a look at towards the northwestern corner. You can see a fair amount of wet weather starting to push its way out of Morocco into Algeria. Long line of rain actually just sliding its way down across a good part of Algeria. Go on into the weekend. That's going to make its way right across the country in all parts of Algeria. We'll see some wet weather as we go on through the next couple of days. That is pretty unusual. We have got some rain there, as you can see, just around that western side of the Mediterranean.
Everton, thank you very much for that. Well, to Hollywood now, and that is where the countdown is on for this year's Oscars. But as the red carpet is rolled out ahead of Sunday's big night, the Latin American community say they've been left out of the picture. Phil Lavelle explains.
You can't move for film star faces in Hollywood. They are everywhere. You can't say the same for Latino stars, though. They are much harder to find.
Here's the thing. Latinos view more movies than any other ethnic group in the whole country. That is in terms of proportion to population. Of those asked, 3/4 said they go to the cinema at least once a month, and they account for 1/4 of all cinema sales in this country. But it appears this place does not reciprocate that affection, at least when it comes to casting. On an average year, more than 3/4 of speaking roles in big budget Hollywood films go to white actors. As for Latino talent, try nearer 4%. And considering Latinos now make up a pretty significant part of this country's population, 17%. In fact, here in Los Angeles, the number is almost double. It does beg one question. What is Hollywood's problem?
That is the verdict from this long-time film and theatre director who says stereotypes have very much to blame.
The executives, the relationship they have is to the mates, the partner, and stereotypes that they can create themselves about, Latinos, music, which is the drug dealing, the prostitute.
And Diana knows all about that.
Gang members, drug dealers, played a lot of hookers, and then there was always the maid and the servant.
A jobbing actress, she spent 30 years on the stage on the hunt for those elusive big screen breaks.
We don't exist in television and film. We are 1 out of 6 Americans in the United States. We're the largest minority. We outnumber blacks, and yet you look at film and television and you do not see Latinos.
But there are some success stories. Case in point, Josefina Lopez. She wrote the hit movie Real Women Have Curves. This is her latest, and this is her powerful message to others.
It's sad to be the loser in somebody else's story, because in a white man's story, I get to be the servant of the loser, and I say no. And that's what I teach people to say, no, challenge that story that you live in, okay? You do not get to be the loser. It takes so much dignity to be who we are, because in someone else's story, if we are the loser, I'm going to show you that I'm the winner.
For some Latinos, Latinas, the red carpet does indeed come calling. For many more, it remains just a dream, and it is likely to stay that way, at least in the short term. Phil Lavelle, Al Jazeera, Los Angeles.
Here with the Al Jazeera News Hour, here's what's coming up.
And we are not at war with Islam. We are at war with people who have perverted Islam.
After Barack Obama's message, we'll be looking at U.S. efforts to challenge terrorism on social media. And now you see him, now you don't. A look at the magic of Photoshop 25 years after it first hit the market. And coming up in sport, after nearly 2 weeks, one of the world's coldest endurance events comes to an end. We'll take a look at how tough it's been for the competitors in the Yukon Arctic Ultra.
For almost 200 years, the British Army has recruited Gurkha soldiers. For many Nepalese, this is their best career option. Witness follows the strenuous selection process that leaves some disappointed and others willing to die for Britain. They swear allegiance to the British monarch for a commission and a chance to live in the United Kingdom. Gurkha School, at this time on Al Jazeera.
Escaping a war, finding a new identity, confronting the reality of racism, religion, and the struggle to be accepted. Al Jazeera tells the story of what it's like to be Lebanese and call Australia home. Once Upon a Time in Punchbowl, coming soon on Al Jazeera.
Frequent tweets test ISIL's propaganda, but not everyone is buying the message. After the U.S. posted this video of a 2011 suicide attack in Pakistan, the YouTube viewer called the U.S., quote, the Satan of the West. Experts say the messaging has another target, people who know and live with vulnerable young people.
There are more challenges. Perhaps what those individuals consider they have some choice in this
U.S. officials say they have no choice. The narrative that ISIL, Al-Qaeda, and other groups are selling can be seductive to the young and naive.
I think we see in the daily onslaught of extremist propaganda real opportunity to use the tools of engagement to expose their deeds and disconnect between their words and their actions.
Some critics say the CSCC is a waste of Washington's time and actually legitimizes ISIL and other groups. But officials here at the State Department say rather than scaling the program back, they're actually planning to expand it. Experts say it's difficult to gauge how many people might be persuaded by the U.S.'s social media efforts. But they also argue that in light of the enemy's reach across all parts of the internet, the U.S. has
Mexico, students have clashed with police in the city. In the state of Guerrero, violence erupted after 3 students from a local teaching college were allegedly detained by the police. Riot squads fired tear gas to break up the crowds. This follows a series of protests over the disappearance of 43 students in September. To Argentina now, in the mass march in the rain and in silence. Protesters again demanding answers over the mysterious death of a prosecutor who had accused the president of a cover-up. Lucia Newman reports from Buenos Aires.
Not even relentless rain kept tens of thousands of Argentines from marking 1 month since the suspicious death of prosecutor Alberto Nisman. Many of his colleagues, fellow prosecutors, led the march, angry that the government had refused to honor Nisman. This sign says, God may forgive them, but not the nation.
Sepamos la verdad de las cosas. For once, Argentina wants to know the truth. There is too much political interference in the justice system. And on the other hand, it is very suspicious that a prosecutor who precisely was investigating the president ends up dead and no one knows what happened.
President Cristina Kirchner has ridiculed suggestions that she may have played a part in the prosecutor's untimely death. This is where Nisman's office used to be. The government's handling of his death has been clumsy at best. In fact, referring to this march, the president's chief of staff and spokesman accused the organizers and the media of plotting a judicial coup and of trying to destabilize the government, further inflaming political passions and divisions in this country. Still, while organizers insist this march wasn't political, the presence of every major opposition leader and presidential hopeful indicated the contrary. Elections are just 8 months away, and while Nisman's death may not be clarified by then, if ever, the prosecutor has become the symbol and a martyr for the ruling party's opponents. Lucia Newman, Al Jazeera, Buenos Aires.
5 Turkish politicians have been injured after a fight broke out in parliament. The brawl happened during a debate over a controversial security bill which would boost police powers and protests. The government says the legislation would prevent violence and protect social order, but critics are saying it's a bid to block mass demonstrations. At least 2 MPs had to be taken to hospital. Greece has asked the European Union for an extension on its loan. Athens is hoping this request will put an end to the wrangling over bailout conditions with its European creditors. The newly elected anti-austerity government is under pressure to keep Greece's ailing banks afloat. The leaders of Ukraine, Russia, Germany have held a telephone conversation in a push to implement a ceasefire in eastern Ukraine. A truce to end the fighting was called in the Belarusian capital Minsk on February the 12th. Ukrainian forces have retreated from the strategic town of Debaltseve, where most of the fighting has been happening. Pro-Russia separatists are said to be now in control of that town. Paul Brennan reports.
They are beaten and in retreat. Ukrainian soldiers finally gave up the defense of their positions in Debaltseve on Wednesday, pushed out by a relentless bombardment from separatist artillery and a ground assault by separatist fighters. And all this happened 4 days after a ceasefire supposedly began. The Ukrainian wounded were taken to Artemivsk and spoke of running a gauntlet of fire.
There are no words to describe it. Along the entire way, we were blanketed with shots. They fired at us with machine guns and grenade launchers. They used everything. We left the Debaltseve around 5 a.m. and until this morning, we were constantly under targeted fire.
The bombardment which broke Ukrainian resistance was carried out by separatist units like this one, southwest of Debaltseve. We found the fighters here confident and bullish. There was no shortage of tanks and armor. Many of the fighters believe the Ukrainians should now be forced to withdraw from the whole Donetsk region.
In my opinion, our first task is to push the enemy back to the borders of the Donetsk and Luhansk regions as they are drawn on the map. After that, we will see.
And there was a thinly veiled threat aimed at any Ukrainian stragglers.
In the near future,